Hey everybody, so today we're going to be doing a portrait in profile, which is something that I don't do a lot of, but I've had a few requests recently, so I thought it would be a good one to do. Drawing the portrait in profile is something that it's definitely an interesting and enjoyable thing. It can, if you're doing a multi-portrait piece, or if you're doing like a figural piece and there's lots of figures in different places, then it's important to be able to understand how to draw the face in every situation. So it's certainly something that you want to learn how to do. It can also, if you're having trouble drawing the person straightforward, by seeing them in profile, you often can understand parts of their face a little bit better. So it's definitely something that I'd recommend doing, especially if you're working on a portrait of someone and you're kind of having issues a lot of times around the jowls or the cheek. Like this sort of area right here is super valuable to draw in profile, because we see some of these planes that we may not see as well when we look at them straight on. And if you understand what's going on, because everybody's cheeks and the area around their mouth and their jowls and things like that, they're all a little different, right? The space underneath the lip and the chin can be different. And if you're looking at it head on, sometimes you don't see as well what you're looking at. My personal preference is always to draw 3/4, just because you get more of an interesting shape of the nose. That's the main thing. And as you guys know, if you've seen my drawings, drawing the nose is probably my favorite part of the face. So, but yeah, let's start with this. So the first thing that I normally do is almost kind of have a little bit of a skull kind of thing happening. So, don't worry so much about where her hair is, but we're going to put like an oval in. The oval is going to be this shape right here, right? So I'm using a 2H, so hopefully you can kind of see my shapes. And then there's another kind of oval like this, right? So if her chin's going to be kind of down here, jaw comes in like this. And you could kind of make a straight line, but you're better off if you can kind of make a line that goes like that. Okay. And then it's just a very kind of basic shape. That might be a bit big, I don't know. Her ear's going to be kind of in here. And what you can do with a profile is you can really dissect where everything is, right? So if we look at where her eyes are, they're pretty close to halfway. So let's pull out a ruler just so I can show you. So when we measure the eyes, your best bet is to measure that kind of corner of the eye. So if we go from the corner of her eye to the bottom of her chin, it's about 2 3/4 inches. So if I go to 2 3/4 inches here, right? So now that's lined up. There's the top of her head. Look at that. Just perfect. Now, obviously, if we shaved off her head, her head is probably more like that, right? So that means that her eyes are just a little bit higher up midpoint, but pretty darn close. So I think this is actually probably going to be more like the top of her head's probably here. So this is probably pretty accurate to her hairline. So then that would put her eyes at around that level. And look at that. Her eyes kind of bisect, and then the top of the ear, maybe the ears maybe a little bit lower like that probably. Okay. And then for me, I like to kind of define that jawline, even though, as you can see in the picture, it's not super, like it's fairly dark. I don't know if the camera looks like it's going a bit dark. Let's see if I can adjust that a little bit. Of course, now you probably can't see over here very well. So, okay, so you're gonna get the drawing a little darker. Sorry, just so that we can see you're gonna get the reference a little darker just so we can see the drawing. What if I raise it and bring in a bit of light? I think that helps. Sometimes, the camera just does weird things when I'm recording. So this was just taken without a flash. It's actually, this photo was taken for my book. I got a couple of friends to model in various poses so that I could have some reference for it. So this is one that I always thought was quite lovely. She's got a really nice profile. So yeah, now if we kind of figure the ear ends right around here. So the ear ends and the jaw kind of comes down, right? So that's what we're going to do. That's going to be basically the jawline. We don't want to go too dark because that's obviously not going to be part of the finished piece. but enough to kind of give me a sense. And I put in her neck's going to be kind of back there like that, and then hair like that, just so I've got kind of things to work off of, right? It's all about building forward with all of our shapes. So if we've got the eye line in here, there's kind of this jowly thing. Her nose is going to be probably right around there. Eyebrows. I actually find the eyebrow line to be more important than a lot of the other lines on the face. Just because it's where the planes break, right? Think about other parts of the face don't necessarily have as much of an important break as the eyebrows do. And mouth is going to be around there, I think. Okay. I look kind of dirty right now. I've got a lot of lines in because I'm going darker than I probably would normally with my 2H, but just really kind of loosely kind of putting in some hair shapes. It's looking pretty good, I think. So I'm just double checking everything, making sure that shapes look good. Now, the nice thing with working with profile is if you wanted to, you could really, like I did with the ruler, you could really kind of work out where every shape is, and they all kind of follow the same plane. So it's a little bit easier than drawing a head-on. Certainly easier than drawing 3/4. It's a little less interesting most of the time, and it certainly can be more difficult to get a likeness because you're only dealing with half the face, right? I'm just going to erase a couple of these lines in here, these construction lines, just because I don't really need them anymore, and I am going a bit darker than I normally would want to. Okay, so that just gives me a little bit more to work with. So I'm going to jump up to a 2B now, sharpening, just so that I have kind of a point of reference. So let's just fill in those eyebrows a little bit more, just because, as I mentioned, that's kind of important. And then, okay, her nose, she's got a lovely nose, but I'm going to try and follow the contour of this nose. So there's a sort of a bump right here, just a tiny one. And then the tip of her nose curves around. Okay, and then we can work out where her nose is going to be, like where the edge of her nostril is going to be, by kind of creating this sort of this arc here. You kind of almost have to see shapes within the shapes, right? So there's not actually a shape there, but everything in the face kind of fits together, so you almost see a shape that's not there, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Sometimes I feel like I sound like Bob Ross. I don't make a lot of sense, but I guess we're not really meant to talk as we draw. So, and then just when you do this part, it's very simple, right? I mean, it's just a series of very simple shapes, but it's crucial that you get these angles right. And, don't move on until you're ready, until you feel like the angles are right. Okay, I think that's right. And this part kind of, her lower lip kind of curves down. It goes like this. I don't like that chin. Let's redo that part. It's close, but it's not quite where I want it. That's good. That feels better. Okay. So, and then we can add a little bit of darkness in here if we want to. It went too high on that nostril. So you'll notice that with the 2H, I basically didn't use an eraser at all, right? Because the lines are so light. I only erased some of those construction lines. With the 2B, because it's a softer and darker pencil, sometimes it's worthwhile to erase them. I probably could have got away without them. I find that I erase lines that are wrong in the construction stage more than in the later stages, right? Because Lines that are wrong later kind of almost add a little bit of depth. They add some interest and some value to the drawing, but lines that are wrong in the construction stage can often trick you up, and you'll say, okay, yeah, I worked that out, that looks good, when in fact it's in the wrong place. So that's something that I will do. So I feel like the nose and the mouth are pretty close. Maybe I want to just put a little bit more of an upper lip. Her lip looks a little bit thin. That feels good. There's this sort of plane on the cartilage of her nose that I want to indicate, but I don't want to get too in detail here. What I want to do now is figure out her eyes. So there's this shape that kind of comes down, and then there's her cheek, right? So we already worked out where the cheek was, so we can kind of build off of that. And if I know where that is, then I know that this is kind of the edge of the eyelash. And then I think our line is actually a little bit low, so I think this is probably better based on where the eyebrows are. So again, I think sometimes the eyebrows are more important than the eyes. Not obviously not for the drawing, but to figure out your placement. And then this, just throw in a little bit of shadow to kind of break this up. So I'm gonna actually go darker here than I normally would because there's a lot of lines going on here. And I want to make sure that I got it right. When you're drawing an eye in profile, there's, like she's got these lovely eyelashes. There's not a lot to see here. You're kind of almost guessing or sort of, like I can't actually see her eyeball or her iris, but I can see there's just a little bit of darkness in there. So that's what we're going to do is it could be shadow, it could be who knows what, but just enough. And then there's a hint of an eyelash over that side. We're just going to indicate that too. Okay, but that looks pretty close. Tovah looks like she's bald now, because we haven't added in any darkness to the hair. But that looks pretty close to me. I think I wish this wasn't so dark so you could kind of see it a bit better, but I think you get the general idea. Okay, so let's figure out that hair. So her forehead comes up just a little bit like that. And there's an eyebrow over there. She does not have a unibrow, but I've kind of drawn it that way. So maybe I'm just going to darken this up a little bit. So she has that ring in her eyebrow. This is the type of thing where, if it was a portrait and I was commissioned to do it and she wanted me to do it, then I probably would include it. Or I might ask. For something like this, I'm not sure if I would, because I feel like it might be confusing. Like if you see it in the photo and you're like, well, what is that? Oh, she has her eyebrow pierced. But if you drew just two little rods in her face, you might be like, I don't know what that is. So sometimes it's easier just to exclude it, for risk of people not understanding what it is. So it's very, very subtle, sort of laying in the hair here. This comes around. So there's a few videos on here about drawing hair. Really the key with drawing hair is it's like drawing a forest, right? That you want to look at, there's like this almost big flap of hair. Like think of it as a big piece of fabric, right? And that's what I'm kind of figuring out at this point. There's a barrette here that's holding it in place. We can indicate that. Okay, and then we're going to flip this around like this. Okay. There we go. Okay. And then we got this edge of the ear that we want to indicate. Okay. probably went a little darker than I'd like to. And again, so here she's got a lot of earrings in. You can definitely indicate those if you wanted to. But it's up to you, right? So, yeah, let's do it. Why not? So there's one here, this top one here, that's very simple because it's just a single earring. These ones down here, I think there's like 4 of them. So we're gonna forget about the fact that there's a little jewel on each of them, right? We're just going to put in the loop, okay? And if you drop out that jewel and you just put it in a loop, it's a lot easier. Make sure that where it enters the ear, we make that part just a little bit darker. Okay, and then it's very easy to break down those shapes, right? And that's true of anything you draw. And you know, the more you draw portraits, I'm just going to sharpen my pencil. The more you draw portraits, the better you're going to get at drawing anything, earrings or balls or tables or barns, right? Because portraits are the least forgiving of any type of drawing. We're so critical of people and faces and hands and feet and full bodies, and you know, we just see them all the time, right? Even if we live on a farm and have a barn outside, if you draw someone else's barn, we might look at it and say, oh, that's an interesting looking barn, but we won't think there's anything wrong with it. Whereas if I draw a person that you don't even know, like Tovah, right, which is the name of the model, if you didn't see this photo and I just drew it and it was a little wrong, you wouldn't know, right? But you might know, looking at it, that it does or doesn't look like a person, right? You might look at it and say, well, I don't know this person, but I think their nose is huge, right? Or whatever, if I made a mistake with it. So portraits and figurative work and anything like that is a very, very unforgiving medium, or very, very unforgiving subject, pardon me. And therefore, the more you build on this, even if you decide down the road that you want to do something else, you want to draw something else, you will have built a foundation that's great. So I'm not going to indicate her tattoos. We're just too far down the page, right? That wasn't really the focus here. Actually, that makes me wonder: would anybody be interested in me doing a drawing of someone with tattoos? Because I'd be happy to do that. Show you how to render tattoos and make them look like tattoos. If you're interested, just let me know in the comments, and we'll see what I can come up with. So she's got like this bit of a this is a construction line, a bit of like the Joker kind of thing happening. I don't know how much rendering I'm going to do on that part, so I'm going to just take that out. I'm going to take out this construction line for her eyes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it is looking like her, right? I think it's pretty accurate. Let's see if we can, so we're only about 20 minutes in, which is, I don't think I would get to this point in 20 minutes if I was drawing it head on, right? But because we're doing it like that, it's so much easier to map everything out. I mean, really, look at the space of the details here. This stuff is pretty loose. Not that this is really finished, but it's a very, very small surface that we've had to worry about, right? In her cheeks, there are, you know, some indication of planes, but it's not much. For the most part, it's all on this part here, right? So let's see if we can just add a little bit of values and kind of make it a more of a finished portrait, just to have a bit of fun with it. There's that little crease above her eye here. I'm going to actually grab a 4B as well. I'm not going to use it a lot, I don't think, but just enough. I just want to take a drink of water here, so hold on one sec. Okay. So a 4B allows us to get just a little bit darker without really adding too much pressure, so that we don't get too much graphite shine. Lower lid, and then we're just going to throw a little bit of a shadow on that eyeball. Okay, so I mean, just in that little bit, that eye is pretty much done, right? I don't think that there's much more I'm going to need to do to that eye because it's in profile, right? So, and then we can just add in some values in here. Just sharpen up this nose area a little bit. So this one, you know, being that it's a demo, it's just a quick sketch. I'm not going to address the background, but, you know, if you were going to do the background, then maybe you would want to look at, you know, whether you want this to be a super hard line like this, or whether you want it to be a softer edge if it was fading into the background or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. It depends on what you were trying to do. I am working on a video. I haven't actually started it yet, but I've working on it in my head as far as gathering some resources and reference stuff and kind of planning out how to explain it on hard and soft edges. I know that I've talked to a few of you in critiques and things like that where I've explained hard and soft edges, but it really needs to be explained visually. So I am working on that, and so that would be something that we would determine with an edge like this, right? This being, her nose is a very sharp edge against the white background, and we're going to leave it like that for this drawing. But if it was going to be, you know, a more finished drawing, like how would we deal with that, right? So. And her upper lip is, because the lighting is just very standard. It's just, as I said, it's just ambient lighting in the room when I took this photo. There's no flash. There's no external light source. I think it's just a, you know, incandescent bulb. The upper lip is going to be darker than the bottom lip. That's normally the way it is, unless you've got some kind of strange lighting elsewhere, right? Because you think about it, the light is coming down. In this case, point of fact, it's coming that way. But her lip is facing up and her lower lip is down. So sometimes there's a shadow cast. This area on the lip here might be dark. But the bottom lip is almost always lighter than the top lip. But don't just take that for granted, right? That's one of the things that we tend to do as artists. We just say, oh, well, you know, I put in the values on the upper lip and now I'm going to do them on the bottom lip. And we don't look and see, you know, just how dark they are or whether they are in fact darker than they should be. We just, because we've drawn them so many times, we just assume that that's how it's going to be. And that's where you run into problems, right? Because you just assume that every drawing is the same, but it's not. Every drawing is different. Every face is different. Every lighting situation is different. Every angle is different, right? I mean, I've drawn Tovah, honestly, probably 30 or 40 times. She's definitely one of my most drawn models. And every time I draw her, I see something a little different, right? Like even this drawing today, I'm kind of looking at the tip of her nose and saying, oh yeah, so it curves like that. Even though I've drawn it many, many times and I know damn well how it curves. It just, seeing it at this angle, right? I've never drawn it exactly in profile. There's a pastel piece, one of my, actually, still to this day, one of my favorite pieces. I did it probably about 3 or 4 years ago. That I titled Shelter from the Storm, that I'm sure you've probably seen somewhere. I think it's actually in one of the demos, not the actual piece, but I kind of explain how I came up with the piece in one of the earlier demos on the site here. And that one is almost in profile. It's a very similar sort of pose. So I've drawn her nose like this before, but for whatever reason, I'm looking at it today fresh and saying, oh, it's interesting that it curves like that. Okay, so you know, like again, this drawing doesn't have to be super finished or detailed or anything. So I don't know how much more I'm gonna do, but I want to, you know, get it kind of a nice little bit more of a finish level, and we'll see if we can kind of see some more things along the way. In here, you know, I've got her jowls kind of indicated, but she has this very interesting sort of smile kind of curve of her lip here. That's better. Yeah, so you can kind of see how that's coming together. I maybe made her cheek look a little bit rounder than it is because I haven't added in values here, but we'll do that. It's a I want to say it's a dangerous game because there's nothing dangerous about it, but you know, when you're playing with values and you start adding in darks and lights and stuff, you have to continue on. If you just do it in one area, then it does tend to change how the face looks, right? So okay, and then I should add in some under her nose and this little bit of cartilage here. And probably the eye needs to go even a little bit darker now that we've got some of these other values in. Okay, and then yeah, let's add in some of the hair and just give it a bit more oomph. Okay, so in here, how is that set up? It's like actually more like that, I think. Yeah, this is kind of the edge of the hair. So we're kind of drawing these shapes now. Obviously, her being blonde, we don't want to go too dark in there. I mean, there's sort of streaks in her hair, so it's not like it all has to stay super light. But you know, we don't want to go too dark with it. Up here is a little darker, so we can do that. And then she calls herself the queen of the flyaways because she always has these hairs that kind of go crazy. But I love that. That's one of the most interesting parts of drawing her, is that her hair is always, no matter how much she does her hair, there's always sort of some random pieces that give it sort of energy, right? It's nice for the drawing. It gives it some life. There's another barrette in there. Maybe we should just, oh, there's kind of a curve of the ear here that I didn't do before, but we'll darken this up a little bit up here. Okay. Okay, and then we've got some kind of hair that's hanging down here a little bit. Okay. So let your pencil do its thing. Don't get too hung up on each individual strand, right? But don't take a line and go straight down. Just, start off dark and let it kind of go, right? As you're making that motion, you're lifting your hand off the page, and that gives it that little bit of oomph. Because we're gonna leave the background white, I'm gonna just come in. This is kind of like a comic book trick. And just in a couple of key places, do you see how I made that darker? Just enough, not a lot, just a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm varying the edges. Gives it just a little bit of visual interest. I mean, it's not a requirement. But what it does is it helps some of those other, so it's almost like a trick, hard versus soft edges. It's not really hard versus soft because we're not doing much with it, but it does kind of vary your line quality, and that makes it a little bit more interesting to look at, even though it's not super, it's not that it's not accurate, it's just, it's not necessary. Like, it doesn't actually add any more visually as far as information, but it just makes the drawing a little bit more kind of oomph and a little bit more finished almost. Okay. There is some shadow down here that we're going to just indicate. Okay, good. Good. And then, I mean, I can keep going with adding more detail to the hair and things, but I mean, the basis for the whole tutorial was to do the face and profile. So I'm not going to do too much more. I think that the finish level is kind of where I want it, but as you can see, actually my hand's not too bad, but you can see I kind of went along and smudged some of this stuff so you could kind of come back in. You in this case, you might be better off putting a little something down, whether it's a piece of paper or a piece of acetate or something, just to keep that edge clean. But it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, you can erase it fairly easily. You're not like damaging, like when you work with pastel, sometimes if you were to smudge it off, you might be taking some of the finish off, but with the pencils, you're very rarely doing that. So it's not too bad. We can come in and add some more values in here, right, just to kind of darken this area. But I mean, as far as mapping out the face, I think you got the idea. So yeah, hopefully that was an interesting and enjoyable tutorial for those that have asked about drawing in profile. Hopefully that was helpful. And if you have other questions, or you want to see more profile drawings, or you want to see something in particular, I have no idea why I'm erasing this, because it's just going to go in the drawer, but whatever. Yeah, let me know. I'm happy to work on something else if there's something specific that you'd like to see. I hope everybody is doing well and drawing lots, and yeah, I look forward to seeing all your work in some of the draw alongs and things like that. So yeah, let me know if you have any other things you'd like to see, and we will talk soon. Okay. Bye-bye.